Welcome everyone. Super happy to be here on Let's Talk AI today with Dylan Anderson. Dylan, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm great.
So maybe for the audience, could you introduce yourself in a few sentences? Today we're going to talk about data, AI, consulting, and a lot of more exciting stuff like regulations. But maybe if you can, in a few sentences, describe who you are, either personally or professionally.
For sure. Well, I think it all intertwines nowadays anyway, right? So my name's Dylan Anderson. I am a lead data strategy consultant at Redkite, which is a data change consulting firm in the UK in London. And we work primarily with CPG based businesses, but all across industries in helping them really get to the level of data maturity that they need to be at this stage in life.
Mm.
And my background is pure consulting. So I've been in strategy consulting for uh, 6 years. And about 2 years ago, I started doing more data focused consulting. And prior to that as well, I coded in R. So I've coded in R in for about 8 years. So
Mm.
one of the first ones. I haven't kept it up as much as I want to, but that has given me kind of that bridge between the strategy realm and the data realm, which is not a very common thing in the data world. So that's kind of me in a nutshell from a professional perspective. Personal perspective, I live in London. Love it. It's an amazing city. And I love everything data and everything sports and activities. And yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thanks a lot for being on the podcast. I have a lot of questions. You mentioned air. You mentioned. I know you have a very big interest in regulations. Um, so the first question I want to do before we get into all those cool details and we learn a lot about what you do, um, being a lead in the team, about consulting, about your vision of the entire industry, about big projects that could be very interesting things to talk about international projects. The first question I want to do before that is, what are you trying to achieve in the field?
Yeah, I think it's a great question because I think every year it's different. And that's what people have to realize is like you have this 5 year plan and guarantee you that 5 year plan is not going to go to up to stuff like you mentioned policy, Matt, and I did my policy degree in the UK, and that's why I moved over here. So I really actually did want to get into data policy and manage and become in the political and government to understand data AI and what it's going to do to the economy. And I ended up back in consulting. And now I'm actually on the data strategy realm and I love it. So my 5 year goals from that is more around data strategy. I think moving in the future, I want to become more of a leader in data strategy, understand how that connects to the world and to businesses in more of a pronounced way because data strategy is becoming a bigger thing and how that connects to AI, ML, and like future areas of data science because there's a lot happening and most people don't even have a strategy for data. So there's still a lot that needs to go on in this area. And I would love to kind of see that through and really help organizations benefit from that, especially in the public sphere where I do have an affinity for government and politics and all that stuff.
Hmm. Super interesting. You mentioned about what you study and your career. Uh, may I ask you to give us a perspective about when you finished studying and what you've done um, through your careers, like maybe key steps that you see on your career, so that we can have a bit of perspective of what you've been doing the past years?
Yeah, for sure. So I graduated from my undergrad in business and politics back 8 years ago in 2015. And right after that, I went into political or into consulting, to management consulting. So I did strategy consulting for about 3.5 years, focused purely on understanding how business works, how to develop strategies for big organizations. And then I knew I wanted to go back into my master's. I knew I wanted to do that, but I was like, okay, I'm going to go back anyway, so why don't I take a little career break? And I took a year off and I actually traveled the world, which was amazing. It was kind of the best decision I made because I was like, I'm in my 20s. This is the time to do it before I have a family. And then I end up in London after that to do my master's in public policy, where I kind of realized like I want to do policy, but I'm also a lot more interested in data and the analytics around it. So I did my whole master's focused around the area of election analytics. So think Cambridge Analytica. That was me in my room doing Cambridge Analytica, but at a lot lower fidelity. And I published a dissertation on how what point does a person change their vote from one party to another in the Canadian and UK political system. And that kind of gave me the credibility to use data in a way that was more strategically thinking and develop insights through my data. And that was why I ended up in data consulting, really. And I ended up at Deloitte, and now I'm at Redkite. But it really was focused on bridging that gap between the data and strategy realm, and that's kind of how it's come full circle. And throughout that time, as I mentioned, I have coded in R, so I understand that world and how to use my R coding, my R programming to deliver insights at using big amounts of data that companies have, but they never actually use properly.
Hmm. Very interesting. And so, okay, so that gives a perfectly a nice perspective of things. You mentioned a lot air coding. Um, so can you give us a little bit more information about how you started coding in air and how it impacted your approach to data strategy and consulting in general?
Yeah, so I was introduced to R in 2014, 2015 in my undergrad university, and it was really about I was actually doing baseball analytics, so American baseball, and it's called sabermetrics, and figuring out how to use the vast amount of stats there are in baseball to make better decisions to predict what's going to happen. And I was just kind of like in love with how you can use the data out there to make these decisions better, and how logical it was, and how the step process of it all. And that's kind of how my mind works. And that that background and that foundation in using R kind of unlocked this whole world of data analytics for me, especially when I started at Deloitte in that data and strategy realm, because I saw the connections between what was happening in the data world, where all of these things were advancing so quickly, and what was happening in the business world, where every company thought that their competitors were doing so well at data analytics, but they were way behind. And every company is the same like that. But they just need to figure out how to use their data properly, and they weren't doing that. And
Hmm.
so just having that perspective of how you can actually create insights from R was really a big plus in my resume, because I understood the technical aspect of it. I've built these things. I know how to draw insights from them, and at the same time I know how the business works. And there isn't that really connection with most people. Most people stay in the technical realm, or they stay in the strategy realm. They don't really bridge the gap between the two. So I think that foundation in R really let me experiment. Plus, I mean, it's a lot of fun. I love coding. And I built like a website and an app via R with election analytics, and just have fun with it. It's so cool to do things like on your computer that you would never be able to do otherwise.
Hmm. Hmm. That's super interesting. Um, I have a similar profile. As a I understand business, but I also enjoy coding. And so you mentioned R. Have you done projects where you need to switch to Python, or like how do you approach like, is it R your like one long time tool that you go to, or like, can you adapt based on like uh I don't know if like the clients have an ecosystem and they want to use Python, because I know Python is very popular too. Like, yeah, how is it like? Do you try to always go for R because you're like so much time into it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because at Deloitte, my whole team worked in Python, so I ended up not doing a lot of dev work because they all had Python skills, and I was too expensive to bill out as like a junior Python consultant. So I ended up I did a few projects in R because it was just kind of my own strategic projects, and I needed to do my own analysis. But I didn't really have. I was used more as a strategy consultant because I didn't have the Python experience. And nowadays, I don't really actually work that much in the IDE. I don't do Python, R, SQL, because I'm more about, you know, saying what this tool can enable for the organization and explaining that
Yeah,
and helping business stakeholders with that journey. Um, I do have on my resume Python beginner and SQL intermediate, because the SQL logic is the exact same as the R logic. But and then I did do some stuff in Tableau. So I mean, I'm well diversified, but R is my expertise.
yeah, yeah. I see. And now with with ChatGPT or whatever tool, it's super easy to translate from one. I think the name Codex
Yeah,
is the model of OpenAI that translate code. I think
yeah. I feel like
so.
you can do it so easily now.
Yeah, it's it's super easy. That's awesome. I mean, AI and machine learning are very sexy. You see a lot of memes on LinkedIn about that when like you're a data scientist or like you start hiring data scientists, but you have no data architecture and like you need data engineers, machine learning engineers, and a lot of people see it too much as like magic stuff, but like it's nothing more than just having proper foundation and like how can you scale your data and most of the time may like so like if depending on the stage and you might agree on that, but depending on the stage you might just need, like you said, just cool BI with the most important metrics and have like two kind of metrics, like the kind of sexy metrics long term, like am I having more users or what is going on, but this is like on one side, and then metrics that understand more the the real growth, because like user growing might not be um, the most important metric to see when we want to evaluate the quality of an application or like how users are engaging with a new feature, etc., etc. And I feel like most of the time, like you said, the data driven mindset is what we need first before like thinking about ML and AI, because this is just a prolongation, a continuation of like what we've been doing and what metrics are we following and how can we enhance more cool metrics once we've that. um I don't know if you want to add something about this.
I mean, yeah, no, you're completely right. I think the most value you can gain as an organization from data and analytics is understanding what's happening first, and then understanding the why behind it.
Hmm.
And then you can move to the forecasting and prescriptive analytics. I mean, it's that those four stages of analytics. Like, you have to think about them all at the same time. So think about the forecasting, the prescriptive stuff, even when you're building the foundations. But don't just jump to the prescriptive and forecasting. To
Hmm.
your point, you need to understand the metrics that work, understand the metrics that deliver value
Hmm.
for the organization before you go off and spend a ton of money to create something that will deliver even more value on top of that. Because if you get the metrics wrong and you build this ML engine and it's like, oh, actually, that doesn't matter, then
Hmm.
it's like, okay, well, what did we just spend £2 million on, or $2 million? Like
Hmm.
it really, you're completely right.
Yeah, I like there is in the book I think it's in the book Traction. I'm not sure of the name of the author, but they talk about the like traction metric basically, and this is like one metric that will drive the entire business. Like for example, I have an application. Let's say I want to have 100 paying customers. Like this is the main metric that I want to boost. And then like it have related metrics and then but like then it helps so much to prioritize. And I feel like prioritizing is like it comes even before like having all the BIs and all the stuff
It,
and then yeah,
oh,
sorry.
oh yeah, no, I was gonna say you're completely right. You keep talking, you keep going.
No, that's like so. This is what I found super interesting. I recommend you this book. I will put it in the description. Traction and it really enhances like the data driven, like how to be data driven. How should I prioritize these BI? Like why do I want to monitor this? And like putting this into a big picture, it will enhance like which pipeline will I do first. Like my data engineers are going to build a lot of things. Okay, cool, but how do I prioritize that? And after all this thinking and having a very data driven thinking, and this is what you said before, then we can say, okay, so now that we have that, how can we enhance these metrics and this data to like do forecasting, or like to, okay, so we see that our users after 2 months of being on the app, they tends to be twice less active. And this is like specific insights that will allow to do like predictive model to like see when the user is going to stop using the application, if we can do something about it. But like if the big picture doesn't exist, then why am I going to try to predict something, and with what data?
Yeah, no, completely. And I think that's a really good point. I think the traction thing is it comes to mind because I think one of the biggest problems that organizations have as well, and I think a lot of data people will sympathize with this, is that the KPIs are different across the organization. So
Mm,
you're measuring different things, and even if they have the same name, they might be actual different things. So the source
mm,
data is different, and that creates a whole host of issues. And
mm,
and then to your point, the prioritization comes into play. And I just worked with a client a little bit ago about prioritizing their use cases in data.
mm,
And what you just said is actually made sense. There was one key metric that actually shone through for a lot of these use cases, and it drove everything else. Like it helped drive their revenue, it helped drive their new customers, it helped drive a lot of things. And so, I mean, a lot of the use cases were centered around this one metric. And what we found is when we were prioritizing, it wasn't about saying, okay, we're going to do one, then we're going to do two, then we're going to do seven, and then we're going to do six, and that's the order we're going to do the use cases. It was actually about a more of a logical flow of based on if we build the foundations for this one metric that drives so many other things, we actually unlock a lot of two, three, four, and five,
yeah.
and therefore we can actually build in a more efficient way. And I think people need to start thinking like that in data and stop being thinking like, okay, we're going to set up a team, they're going to sit over here, and we're going to set up another team, and they're going to sit over here,
Yeah.
and we're going to have them building two different things and not talk to each other, and therefore there's no efficiencies, even though they're working on a few sources that are the same and they have similar metrics. And that's how companies build today, and that's why we spend so much money on data and don't get the value returned. So it is about prioritizing, but prioritizing in the right way where you're unlocking as much value as possible across the business using one or two kind of main sources and main metrics.
Hmm. Hmm. That's super interesting. Thanks for sharing this case. Um, so I wanted to ask you, following up on this, and we'll get back to AI and machine learning right away. But I wanted to mention storytelling and how to effectively communicate. Um, so um, so you've been doing consulting for quite some time now. You've had a lot of clients. We can easily see that you have a very a great way to express yourself and communicate messages. Uh, and this is a very strong point, not only for like clients but also for like teams, and like expressing this concept and these ideas and implementing it um, are very challenging tasks. And a lot of the time, like you said, like some teams will we end up being separated and not be driven by the same metrics, and so not questioning why this went wrong, and maybe just like do one why, and like if you keep pushing to five whys, then then you understand deeper, but they won't do that. And so about storytelling and communication and communicating, like how to communicate effectively, do you have key takeaways, and what is your perspective on, yeah, storytelling, communicating, data team, data insights, based on different audiences, clients? Could you share about this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I echo everything that you said because it is kind of getting down to those five whys are get to the so what and really understand what people are looking after. And I think the first step you have to think about is who's your audience.
Hmm.
So are you presenting to the CDO? Are you presenting to the CEO? Are you presenting to your manager? those are three different audiences with three different levels of attention span and interests. So you have to make sure you align those interests with your audience. The second big thing that I think people lack is bringing stakeholders along for the journey. You don't create a story or a presentation in one day and present it. It takes months. It's a project presentation. It's something like that. So engaging people, talking to people, getting their perspectives on it, and bringing them along for the journey. Another great way to do this is also even include quotes from them in an anonymous fashion and then draw out themes and say, look, we talked to like 20 different people and here are the themes. And here's some direct quotes that just show like, this is what we mean. That always astounds people. They're like, wow, someone else thought the exact same thing I was thinking. This is great. Like, let's do this. So that really helps bring people along as well. A third thing, and I think this is super problematic in the data industry, and it's something that I've had problems with a lot too, and like everybody does, is it's hard to get out of the weeds. We love the details because we built the details. So when you build your dashboard, when you build your machine learning model or whatever, you want to be like, okay, well, I used this, the p-value was this, I ran a t-test, it was this, and you're like, no one cares about that. Like, let's be real. What they care about is it delivered this, and therefore the business should do this. Those two things, that's it. You just need the insight and the implication, and then have all the rest in the appendix. But because we did the details, because we built that, we want to include it because we're like, I spent so much time on this. But no one cares. And if you do that, then you lose the audience right away. So that's a key thing. And I think it goes back to exactly what you said, Thomas, where it's like, you got to get to the 5 whys. What is the point of what you did and why did you do it? And that is about creating a story. And then one final tip of actually like creating a PowerPoint presentation is I've seen a lot of bad PowerPoint presentations.
I can imagine.
and I create a lot of them too. But I think in the data world, they tend to use a lot of text. You tend to try to add in too much more than there needs to be. And in the business world, time is the biggest resource available, especially for like C-suite, CEO level. They just want to be told what to do and what the output was. So less is often more. Call out things on graphs. Don't use a ton of text. Use the headlines as actual descriptors. So actually tell your story in the headlines before you even put stuff on the slide. You can just write the headlines and then put stuff on the slide because that really helps guide you. And then take a moment, like take a day away from it and then look back on it, edit it based on that kind of stuff. That's how you create a good story. That's how you get better at communication. It's not about saying more. It's about saying less, but saying the exact same thing with less.
Super interesting. How about going to a client without a presentation?
Well, then you just have to learn to be a consultant and bullshit your way through.
Yeah, that's yeah, because a lot of the time, what I've seen in my humble experience in consulting, it's we do these PowerPoints where like because we're not sure. Maybe this is more like when you do offerings or and like you do a lot of text to explain a lot of things. And I would like to send the same like two presentations, one very soft like the less is more ID, and one like very detailed about what we've done and how good we are and all of that, and see the ratio of which works best. Because I don't know, I'm always super intrigued about, and what if we've done things differently, like what would have been the outcome.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty funny. I think everyone would open the one that just says a little bit, and you get like 2 or 3 stakeholders reading the detailed one because they might need to. But the thing is, I mean, this is in consulting, but in everywhere else too, is you still need that detail. You still need to show your work and be like, this is how I got there, and this is the detail if you want to read it. But eventually, like as you build up your reputation, as you build up your trust with your client or your stakeholders, they will then be like, you know what, Thomas, you're a solid guy. We know that you know your stuff. So we're just going to take what you put on the executive summary and take that verbatim, and we'll go do it, because that's kind of the relationship you build.
Mm.
But those first few times that you're engaging a client or a stakeholder, you do need to show your work and be like, okay, well, here's the details if you want to read them, if you have time to read them. And most people don't, but you need to show that. But at the same time, you do need to story tell those details as well. You can't just put a ton of text on the page and expect people to read them, because just like no one who's listening to this podcast likes to read documentation. Um,
I know some guys.
do they like to read it, or they like the fact that they understand it better after they read it?
They do like to, but I think it's like there are a level where when they go into documentation, like for example API documentation or like a tool documentation, it's just like they've become so good at these things that they're just curious and they're just learning through reading documentation.
To be fair, I've learned more about coding reading documentation after trying 20 times and failing, and then read the
Yeah,
documentation. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. I
yeah.
don't know why I didn't do this before. But then I'll still make the mistake and not do that
Yeah,
in the
me
future.
too, me too.
But anyway, the initial, and that's what I'm saying, is like the initial human response is not to go and read the encyclopedia of documentation. It's to
Mm-hmm.
just go get the highlights
Mm.
and then try it out and see what you do. And then if I need someone to read the documentation, I call up my analyst who's below me and be like, hey, Susie, go read the documentation and tell me how we're going to build this. But the CEO is not going to read the documentation. The CEO is not going to read the appendix in detail. They're going to read the exact summary, and that is the most important part.
Exactly. I think from what I understand, it's like one thing if I'm doing an offering or if it's a new client, we need to showcase our skills and in details if like someone technical, for example, is going to review or work, if it makes sense, if what we propose makes sense. So that is important. And like what you said is like it really depends on who is in front and like what my client wants. Does my client want to understand on a medium level the architecture, some graphs, but not too much, and some text and like the business value and some pains and etc.? Or do they want like very straightforward presentation with like more interaction and less like graphs and text? Or do they want a very sophisticated thing with very detailed? Yeah, I think it really depends then on each person that we're going to talk to. But from what I hear from your experience, most of the C levels, they don't want so much details, right?
Yeah, yeah, and you brought up a great word there too, is interaction, and I think that's something that's super important in presentations, is being engaging and really
Mm,
talking to your stakeholders, bringing them along, and being like, okay, what metrics do you think is great? And you can even do that in a presentation, and doing that elicits buy-in. It
mm,
creates a want for people to be part of it, for it to succeed, because they see themselves in it and they're participating in it. I mean, everyone's been on that Zoom call that's like 90 minutes, and you're just watching a presentation, and 10 minutes in, you're out. You're like clicked out, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna turn off my video and vacuum or something like that.
that's that's horrible.
So don't
Like,
be that person. And a lot of data people are that person.
no, no, that's like what you mentioned right there is my my fear, my biggest fear in a company. It's like being stuck in a 90 minutes presentation where I have nothing. So my approach to that now is letting a bot for me here in the and like it will summarize everything after the call ends. And so if I have things to do or the only thing I can do is answer questions because I won't be there. No, no, but that's something like, yeah, this is I think this is a lot of like time management is a very big is super important to me. And like between 15 minutes to 30 minutes calls, I feel like it's okay because it can be efficient and if the call have a purpose. But like calls that doesn't have a purpose and we're going to be 50 in a call and listening to one guy and it have interest for like three of all the 50 people, yeah, my struggle. But uh, but
I feel you. I feel
somehow I
you.
somehow I don't end up in these situations. Either because I make sure I don't happen. But, I mean, anyway. So
That's good.
joking, but yeah, thanks for sharing these points. Very interesting points. So we talk about misconceptions, we talk about air, we talk about storytelling. So you worked with a lot of large companies. You have a specific interest in the public sectors, politics. How large companies are using AI and machine learning to drive revenue or create value?
Yeah, I mean, it builds on what I said before, in that
Mm,
a lot of companies aren't, and even a lot of large companies aren't. And I think it really is, the biggest thing is sector dependent. So a lot of tech companies, especially new age tech companies, are using ML and AI,
mm,
and they're using it because they were built from a digitally native perspective. So they built that and use that as their unique selling point, a USP. But in companies that are well established and that are huge, ML and AI is only a kind of a small department in their organization, if anything. I think a lot of companies we work with, they're in the billions of dollars in terms of valuation, in terms of revenue, in terms of sales. They have an amazing process. Like they've been doing what they've been doing for years. They know what they're doing. They're very efficient in how they do it, and they're not using ML and AI at a large scale yet. They're using it maybe to help improve some of their analysis. So you're doing regressions, doing clustering, using a bit of NLP. It's not that prevalent yet, but some of that stuff is happening kind of ad hoc. And then there's a bit more of an emphasis on using ML in forecasting. So to do forecasting in a good way, you want to start using machine learning to really kind of understand how to best optimize and best simulate these types of things. AI, I haven't seen really anywhere, to be honest. And to be fair, I don't work with Google or Microsoft, but other than just using AI add-ons and tools and maybe a chatbot or two, but AI is not actually being used by a lot of these large companies. The other thing that I'll say is, like, I did actually, when I was at Deloitte, I worked with digital twins, which is simulation. So simulation based modeling based on building a virtual ecosystem in a Python IDE, setting that up so that you can actually replicate what the physical world is doing. And I did see some of that stuff happening with companies. But again, companies were doing this as proof of concept. So they started out by building it for a one-off kind of scenario using CSV files from Excel, or like a very, without even a SQL database or something like that. And
mm,
then they had to build the foundations around it because they're like, wow, this proof of concept was great. It delivered so much value. And so
mm,
they had to build the foundations, the data foundations, to actually enable that digital twin.
mm,
And it's the same case as the ML model. Like if you're building a forecasting model, it needs to draw from the data foundations. So
mm,
that's really where we're finding, and that's where I'm finding a lot of organizations are. But they are very quickly getting their shit together, excuse my French, because they know they need to. And they have started to realize that we're not going to throw money at ML and AI until we have those foundations ready to actually build on top of that. And they are hiring leaders who know how to get to that stage with the ML and AI and the forecasting. And that's, I think, the most progress that these large organizations are seeing. Um, yeah,
oh, that's super interesting. Um, Based on, I feel like, so you mentioned like those companies, those big organizations are doing like very specific tasks like over and over, and I feel the same way. It really depends on the industry, but we'll see like churn prediction models or risk prediction models or like sales forecasting, or it's like very, like you say, it's like linear regression or like very basic models at scale
yeah,
somehow. um and what you said also is like when we build a proof of concept, we build it with CSV, but then we need like a new data model. We need to host it, either it's in the cloud or on premise or both, and this takes some data engineering, and it takes some time. Um,
Yeah, like no, exactly. And I think that is one reason also that we've seen in the data industry this huge shift from data science to data engineering. That's why. Is
mm,
because you start building these things, you're like, oh, it creates great value, but we have none of the foundations to actually keep this going and make it productionized. And
mm,
so that's where the data engineers came in. And now I think we're even seeing another shift. I think data engineers are still super high priced and super valuable, but another shift to data analysts. Because now the business are realizing, okay, we set this up, but like it's not delivering actual value. We need data analysts to come in and like tell us what it means, right?
mm,
So that's the other shift that I think it is seeing, and it all comes back to like this proof of value thing or proof of concept thing of building something, seeing if it works and seeing if it actually delivers ROI, and then building out the foundations around it. And I think a
mm,
lot of companies are on that journey.
mm. Yeah, totally. And I feel like profiles in the teams are going to be more and more hybrid. We talk about a lot lately MLOps, machine learning operations. We talk about machine learning engineers. And like I feel like today a data scientist, a great data scientist, should not only know how to build models and like analyze data, but also like how will my model be hosted? Like,
Yeah,
am I using cloud? Am I on premise? What kind of, is it AWS? Is it Azure? Like, how do I implement this model? How do I maintain it? How do I retrain it? And like all of the things, and like what are the pipelines? Like, what are the pains? What are the reasons that my model is not how I would like it to be? And maybe it happens in the data engineering part where some data doesn't arrive as it should. And I feel like having this big picture is going to be more and more important, because today a data scientist, the job of I mean, I won't take out the value of like great data scientists are like, I mean, super valuable, but my point is having the big picture in mind, and like being agile between, okay, so I'm going to go into this pipeline and I'm going to code this pipeline so that I have this data and I can continue without like connecting to the data engineering team. And so where am I going with that? I would like to ask you about how do you see a bit of those roles evolving with like the release of ChatGPT, GPT-4, and like the field evolving. How do you see it in the
yeah,
future?
yeah. No, I'm really glad you brought that up. I could completely agree with you. I think the siloed data scientist, the siloed engineer, is becoming less valuable to an organization. I think people do need to learn more about the data space. Like, for example, a data engineer that doesn't know anything about data governance. I don't want that data engineer. I know data governance might be boring as hell, but if you don't have data governance, you're making your job 10 times harder. So I don't, I want people who are more well rounded, but you don't need to be an expert in everything. You just need to know a lot of these elements. And this is actually one of my biggest qualms with the data industry right now. I think it's too siloed. I think everyone's like, okay, I'm a data engineer. I'm just going to focus on engineering. I'm a data scientist. I'm going to focus on ML models. I'm a data analyst. I'm going to focus on dashboards. And it's like, okay, yeah, but you also need to know how the data ecosystem works. Like what's the life cycle? What's the strategy behind it? What's the governance around it? How you can productionize? Like all these things matter to different roles, and you can't just leave it to the head of analytics or the CDO to manage that. If you want to grow in your career, you have to kind of start thinking a bit more big picture. And it goes back to the storytelling thing I was saying as well, right? People are too stuck in the weeds. They're too focused on upping their technical skills and being like, okay, I now know this new library. It's like, no, focus on kind of actually delivering the results, which is coming at a higher level. So to your point, to Matt, it really is like learning to think with a business perspective with while having the skills to deliver data results and data insights. and that is going to be the new normal. And I think, I mean, I posted on LinkedIn a little bit ago about how everyone's still talking about, oh, become a data analyst, learn SQL, get a 6-figure job. And you're just like, I'm just like, no, it's not 2017 anymore. It's like, that's not going to happen. Like, it's not. ChatGPT is a $20 a month thing, and you can have it write all your SQL code. What you're going to see people hiring for nowadays is that connection between the two, that understanding, as you mentioned, of the different realms of data and how that delivers impact, and delivering value and showing that you can deliver value. It's not going to matter as much of whether you can code or not.
Super interesting. Uh, yeah, those are a very interesting time, and the progress is it feels exponential. It feels like every day something is happening right now. It's
Yeah,
crazy. It's hard to keep up.
yeah.
Um,
We built the tools to take our jobs away from us.
exactly, but I feel like I think I was listening to the CEO of OpenAI, and I feel like we're just going to produce more. And like what he said, and like this is not my idea, but I think Sam Altman, I think
Hmm.
his
Yeah,
name.
yeah,
Maybe
Sam.
I mispronounced.
Yeah, no, Sam, that one. Yeah,
Um, and he was really like, those tools are just going to make us produce more faster. And so this is going to be an interesting shift too in consulting and in companies in general. Like, how do you adopt these new tools so that you don't stay behind? Because like if you're a content creator, there is going to be so much content in the future because of like
yeah,
AI and process. Or if you're in the industry, you're going to build so much more code. Like your engineers are going to be, but like it's still the same problems. Like when someone is going to do a pull request, you need to review that code. You need to make sure that that codes work with the rest of the code, assuming that you're working on an application and you have an environment where you have engineers working on specific tools, and you need to be data driven more than ever. You need to understand your 5 whys. You need to have feedbacks, and you need to slow down when things are not working well. But I mean, that's my point of view on this.
yeah. I mean, I agree. I think you still need the human in the system, because we're not at that point yet. And I think there's also two sides of the coin of like the whole AI is going to replace all these jobs and stuff like that, and then the AI side is like all the people who love AI and are working on it are saying like, well, no, it'll just create more jobs that are around this realm. And I think that's somewhat true. I mean, we've seen it in the past industrial revolutions, and when computers were introduced and the internet boom, it didn't replace all jobs. It created more in a different realm. The one downside of that, though, is the market will have a tough time keeping up, because whereas those things happen over decades or even like half a century, this is happening in like almost instantly. So over the next 2 years, we'll see a huge change in the market, kind of thing. Like that kind of quickness in how things are changing is scary,
Yeah.
and it is different. It's difficult to predict what will happen to the jobs in the future as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, so I mean, I think that's a huge point that like is understated in this realm. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're going to be both. We're going to assist to both great things and bad things, and I think we'll need to adapt. But it's very fascinating, and I
Yeah.
mean, you can't really stop progress. It's not like you can put a barrier, or we see petitions about like trying to limit AI, and it's a complex subject, but it is very important, and it is very related to policy regulations, and this is related to my next question. So my next question is, what are your thoughts about the current state of regulation for AI and machine learning in general and in the public policy?
Yeah, I hoped you were going to go there next. My AI model told me that you were going to go there next. No, but I think it's a hugely underappreciated and scrutinized area. I mean, from both sides. Like on one side, everyone's like, yeah, the government can't do anything. They're pretty inept at everything anyway. So what are they going to do with AI? Like they can't keep up. And then on the other side is like, okay, AI is terrifying. Like we need to like put barriers in this right now. I think to what we were just speaking to before on having a human in the system and human in the process, I think that's where regulation needs to go. Is it just needs to enable how we integrate humanity and human type thinking into what AI creates or what the outputs are or what the products are. Because right now we're not doing that. We're letting the AI grow on its own because it's cheaper and it's doing great and it's doing amazing things and whatever. And like actually, sorry, some of these companies do have like ethics teams and those types of things that are doing some of that stuff in the background, but you don't hear as much about it. But my point, and I think it was an article I read this morning about like I forget his name, but he just stepped down from Google and he helped build these ML systems that kind of are the background of the neural networks, and he's a huge player in that. And he said we're creating artificial and machine based intelligence, which is very different from human intelligence, and that can go too far in different ways, and it can also multiply in different ways. And I think regulation has to focus not on stemming that because it's going to advance no matter what, but on just making sure that humans are involved in it. It's like the nuclear codes, like or the nuclear devices in the U.S. Right? You have multiple people who have to press the button for to launch these nukes. With AI, I think we need to kind of start including the humans in the decision process where okay, no, you know what they wrote was bad and we need to kind of neglect that and get rid of that, and therefore that shouldn't be included in the training model or what have you. And I think we need to start with thinking like that. But I don't know. The problem is people making these rules and regulations don't understand the technology, and there isn't the investment from uh, the private side to really kind of make this a huge priority. And also, like a lot of businesses using AI don't really see the harm in it right now. I think it's just about kind of recognizing that look, we're going to create something. It's not going to be Terminator esque at all, but it is something that we're creating a mind, a being, or whatever that can think better than us, that is more intelligent than us, that could probably manipulate us, and we need to do it in a way that is sensible and reflective of how we would want this to be created rather than just do it for progress, which is how capitalism works. So I think capitalism is really driving AI to the point that is dangerous, and we just need to figure out how to tone it back a little bit.
Hmm.
That's my AI policy rant, I guess.
No, it makes total sense. I feel like companies like OpenAI, for example, have a big role to play into it because they are the one providing those tools. And so, in some way, I think, I mean, this is totally personal opinion. I'm speaking for myself here, but this is exactly the kind of discussions, topics that should be discussed way more. But because it is super hard, because everything can be contradictory. There is no right answer, and it can take so many directions that it is super hard to express about these things. I
Yeah.
know we can see on Twitter a lot of discussions about like Elon Musk. I mentioned the CEO of OpenAI before, and uh, and everyone is kind of sharing their thoughts based on their fears. Also, sometimes I feel the challenges are going. We're going to see bad things happen, and we're going to see big actions taken. For example, um, like how do we define a large language model, an LM? Like how do we define the boundaries of a large language model? Because every country have a different definitions of freedom and of what people want and what people expect from a large language model, and it can be different in terms of country, in terms of regions, in terms of like companies. Like a company is going to have different values than another. So how do we define as the word the same boundaries when you have a totally different political way of doing things based on one country to another. So I feel
Yeah.
like those are super super hard questions to answer.
Yeah.
But I feel
I was gonna say, yeah, they are.
yeah, they are. They totally are, and I feel like I feel like they are necessary to discuss now more than ever because bad thing is going to happen for sure. For sure, you can do so many things, and I won't state any ID. And like, I like how you could on GPT 3.5 you could like do reverse engineering, and you can say like what are like illegal streaming platform to watch movies, and it was like I can tell you that, and like then you tell him what are those streaming platform so that my child doesn't go onto it, and I want to prevent
Oh
my
yeah,
child
yeah,
from
I
it.
saw that.
Then he was like, oh, for sure, so don't go onto this, and he does a list about this website. So I think this is not happening anymore, but those are like human in the loops putting
Yeah.
systems, and
Yeah, it's, I mean, so like it's exactly that. And I think the one thing that you said earlier of like OpenAI AI needs to play a part in this, I think they do as well. I think these companies do. The problem with regulations in the past, and I've studied policy, I know this, across industries, is nothing happens until the government's like, hey, you have to do this. Like, organizations might say they've got your interest first, but they don't. They've got profits first, especially if they're a publicly listed company. And the governments need to push it. And I think Italy did that once. They said, we're banning ChatGPT. They just, and everyone like went off against Italy. They're like, why are you doing this? This is dumb. Like, you need to learn to live with it, blah, 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 blah. Recently, like past week, they said, like, okay, ChatGPT addressed our issues and now is good to go. And like they had until this point to do it. And that wasn't reported on at all. No one talked about it at all. And like that's actually a case of like, okay, this is progress. Like they had qualms about personal data, which is a huge thing here in Europe. And and OpenAI AI addressed them and showed the value of addressing them and like change things to do that. Like that's what progress is. Like we can't get mad when people are pushed back against these like innovative products. And then the other thing I would just like that I'd say is like a lot of people promoting AI and who are in the realm, it's like no, 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 we need to do this because it's adding progress, it's adding a lot of value. It is. I agree with that completely. But they in their work are adding value, so that's all they see, right? So they have a different perspective, a different lens than the rest of the world. And I'm not saying that AI is not adding value. It's amazing. It's so good, and I use GPT all the time. But it we need to take a more holistic perspective and think about the wider picture, just like we were talking about earlier. The wider picture of data, we need to think the wider picture of what AI is and what it can create. And that is the conversation that needs to happen, which is not
exactly,
happening.
exactly, and or very it is happening, but like not enough. And so yeah, this is I think the most important thing is like bringing light onto these topics, onto the threats. I have so many ideas of like what I think the main point that I'm concerned about is disinformation because of how humans works. The problems are going to come from like the human weaknesses, and it is super easy to go viral by stating false information that that play on fears and play on in people, and disinformation I think is one of the big concerns, and there are a lot of more other concerns, but it's like exactly the most important thing is to address those topics and to keep a big picture of what am I doing,
Yeah,
what am I
exactly.
doing. I talked to I had a Claudia Mel del Pozo. We have an episode on the podcast, and she mentioned a specific case where some data scientists assumed that they had products. They had a specific products that were being uh, stolen more, or I'm not sure what exactly was happening with these projects, but they ended up putting these projects in in a vitrine, and you couldn't access those products. You had like someone had to open it and get it for you, and right near those projects that were being protected, there were kind of the same projects but for another type of person. And so basically it ended up being like, uh, I'm trying to to summarize what I understood from what she explained to me, but basically it was like a clustering of ethnical type of customers that ended up like, for those specific people we're going to close this project up, and for these specific people it's going to be free to grab, like you can grab it and
Yeah.
just go to. And so like when you listen to this case and you're like, okay, so no one in this said, okay, that's weird, or
Yeah.
like that's wrong.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we're going into this direction, some data can provide some support to this, but this is wrong, like there is a problem with that. And
Yeah.
the fact that they went through with it enhance a very real case of how can things go wrong. And in this case no one gets hurt, but there are other cases where we can where it's the impact is on another scale.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to earlier. It's like that's one reason like things like data governance are so important, and data
Hmm.
ethics and those kinds of elements that we often put aside because we want to achieve speed and we want to
Hmm.
achieve progress quite quickly. But to that point, like if you had governance in place, like it wouldn't do that. It
Hmm.
wouldn't kind of dismiss what it should and like just go to the next easiest thing because then the data is wrong and therefore it would break governance rules.
Hmm.
Um, and I think governance. I mean, if they promoted and they shared more about the governance around these things, not how the neural networks work, but how they're governed, I think that would actually inspire a little bit more trust and a little bit and more focus on that. Again, the problem with governance and quoting Carly Taylor that I heard on a conference is when it's working, it's boring as hell. So no one wants to do it.
Yeah, yeah, I relate. um so I think that's for the regulation part. Um I would have maybe I would like to ask you about, so before before I go into like the last few questions I would have for you. Um, uh, this podcast is coming. We're touching the last few questions. Um, my question for you is maybe for people who are starting in the industry, or who have an interest in your career. Would you have some advice to those individuals, like to grow their career and to um, and to achieve their goals into the data and AI industry?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think I'll do three pieces of advice because consultants love threes. One, one is pick a focus. I think we get to. I mean, we were talking about people being well rounded and stuff. That's fine, but like pick a focus where you want to be your expert in, because otherwise you're just gonna spend too much time dabbling in little things and not actually develop your skills in an area that you want to be. It could be like geospatial analytics or forecasting ML or like NLP, like whatever that focus is, pick it and dive into that and that, do it because you're passionate about that area as well. The second thing is like build a community. I didn't when I started in data, and that's one reason why I didn't actually do much data when I started learning R. So I
Hmm.
think like there's a ton of communities out there. Just find one. LinkedIn is great. I mean, obviously, I've built my LinkedIn brand on there. I've built a community through there. Um, it's a bit oversaturated now, but like LinkedIn is still a great spot to meet other like type people and then talk to them and speak to them face to face. Don't just worry about clicks and follows and likes and stuff. Actually, like, talk to them because that's where you actually learn things and start to develop meaningful relationships and friendships. And especially at people who are like at your level who are also doing the same thing. That's the key, so you can learn together and grow together. And then the third thing, and I've kind of harped on this for the rest of the call, so I'm not going to spend too much time on about it. But be diversified and think about the business. So you need to think about the value you're delivering in whatever you make, whether it's a personal project or a work project or a work task. Think about like what benefit you're going to create, and if you start thinking about that more and more, like you're gonna advance faster and you're gonna grow in your career faster. And how I always like to do that is emulate the people above you. Think about how they think, learn from them, ask them how they learn, how they think about these types of things, because they're 2 or 3 years above you or more, 10, 20. And they've done it before and they can do it much faster than you. So you have to kind of emulate and learn from that, and take that feedback and grow with it. And I think going back to the diversification thing, they are thinking from a higher level, and that is what you want to eventually do if you are going to grow to your career in a managerial perspective, or from a certain way. And then yeah, so those are my three pieces of advice. I think there's a lot you can get out there from advice, and you really do have to be picky about what you take, because everyone's offering advice in the age of social media, and some people have like 2 months of experience and they're saying like this is how you grow in your career. It's like, well, you're in your first job, but then there are some people who maybe have 2 months into a company, but they're offering advice on how to get a job in data analytics, and that's relevant because they actually have done it. So really be picky about what advice people are giving, because there's so much out there, and what value it's going to give to you and what you're going to do with it too. You have to take action on that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's super super interesting. Thanks for this three tricks.
Three and a
And
half ish.
this is a trick that I mean, in this case, I'm not saying it's a trick, but I personally like to showcase the data driven perspective. You're going to say, okay, so I'm going to answer it in 3 points, and I have no idea what these 3 points are going to be when I'm stating that, but I'm going for it. I'm going to find 3 points.
People like threes. It's a human psychology thing, and it's literally a consulting thing. You do it all the time.
Yeah,
But you're
yeah,
usually two is too small, four is too much, three is just
yeah.
right.
Yeah, it's like a podium. Like a podium is exactly that. So,
Yeah.
Sam Altman told something very interesting in a podcast that I recently listened with Lex Friedman, and he said about like everyone have like he couldn't give like you said, like it's hard to give advices because everyone have a different path. And if today I say I have a very strong interest in NLP, it's because what I'm doing in NLP makes sense with what I'm doing. But I feel like it really comes to like expose yourself to information, be very cautious about what information do you let in, and what information do you reject totally. And
Yeah.
then based on this information, what does like what does feel right to me.
Yeah.
And like and like this is, I think, is the trickiest part, because we want to like find path and find ways and like follow, and but like I think like the real value is like what is right for me.
I 100% agree. It really is about finding your passion, and that will change over time as well. So you will constantly go back and be like, you know what, I'm not interested in NLP anymore. I'm now interested in deep learning, whatever, right? And so you constantly have to reflect. You constantly have to iterate. And then the other thing I'd say about that is you um, oh, I forgot. I had something really good, and I just did like this happened to you earlier too. Um, but but yeah, you constantly have to adapt and iterate and stuff. And oh yeah, what I was gonna say is like if you're super into, I've met a lot of people who are super into AI. They're super into deep learning, ML, and it's like that's great. That's great. You're beginning your career. You're gonna learn to build these systems. Cool, but like just be aware, you're probably not gonna build those for some years, because one, the company you get hired by won't be at that stage. Two, there's gonna be people who are like above you and well advanced than you. And then three, it's like you're going to be a junior person at a company, and you're not going to be expected to write these new scripts. You're going to have to like work your way up to that. And just I'm like, that's great. You love it right now. You think it's really cool, but make sure you're passionate about it, that you can actually sustain yourself for 3 or 4 years until you get to that point. It
Hmm.
Because you're not going to be doing those fun, amazing things right away. It might take a couple of years. You have to have the passion to stick with it, to know you're going to get there. You have to work
Hmm.
your way up, and that's the thing I don't think people realize. They're like very into like, oh, I want to do this right now. Oh, I'm not doing it right now. I'm going to leave this company and go try to find somewhere else. And that is why one reason why people end up at like 4 jobs in 3 years. But it really is, you have to find that passionate point and be in it for the right reasons, not the money, not the coolness and the sexiness of it, but because you love it.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is why I always say, like, don't like don't wait. Like, if you have an interest in something, if you're not doing it in your job, do it in your own project.
Yeah.
And like, start doing it right now. Like, no excuses. Like,
Yeah.
you want to do that, do it. Just
Yeah.
do it. Like, find a little project, side project, build it, and see how it feels. And maybe you'll go from one project to another, and this project you're going to like it a lot, and you're going to build your company from it, or like, we don't know, but like, this is what you said. And like, what feels right. And like, I can't do everything right now. I want to learn robotic. I just need beauty videos. We discussed robotic just before starting this call, and I have a new patient about robotic. I don't know. Maybe it will last a week. Maybe it will last. I don't know. Maybe I will end up building robots. But I
Yeah,
think
but
that's the case of, yeah.
yeah, but just do it. Like exactly what you said. Just do it.
Exactly.
Like, and you then
Yeah.
you have the proof point too. Like you've got it. Like, oh, I built this over the weekend, and there it
Yeah.
is. And like
Yeah. Exactly.
you have to like actively be like, okay, you know what? I'm setting aside a weekend. I'm gonna spend the weekend building my mini robot that's gonna do everything I want and walk across the desk. Basically,
Yeah.
that's what Tama
That's
wants.
why I want to have chats with my little robot. But yeah, I think that's a very very good point, because we see so much people having success, and like, and we assume that success might be somehow happiness, and it might be related. But I feel like enjoying the journey is about like having fun, and having fun is about doing things that talks to me at some point. And maybe I will build robots for 1 week, and maybe I'll leave it and never do it again. But this approach makes me, I feel like, more confident with I'm not frustrated, because I try what I intend to try and to discover, and by doing so every time, and like you said before, iterate, one gains so much. I mean, I'm more restating and like sharing. Half of this is my personal view, and half of this is like what I've heard in the podcast through last episode.
Hmm.
The tips you mentioned before, Joe Reese. We have a very interesting episode with Joe Reese about similar topics. But I feel like this is the core thing. I built so much confidence on knowing that I will be true to myself, and I will try these things, and I will follow what speaks to me at some point. And then you're like driven by your own on wheels, and it's not like about learning one coding, like, okay, I need now to code in C because I have this project. It's not like I'm going to do a crash course about C and blah blah blah. I'll just start directly trying to do what I want to do, and learning on the go about what I need to learn to do what I want to do. And
Yeah.
we talked about the traction metric before. And in this case, my project is my traction metric and what I will learn, which will enhance my skills in data science, in data engineer, in my how do I do code, how do I do business, how am I driven. It is all related to my objective to have my little robot on my desk, basically.
Yeah, no,
Basically.
exactly. And I would say my traction metric is like just learning and growing as a data person, and I think having that is such a powerful thing because it does make you do. It makes you because you want to create, like you have to do and
Yeah.
create to do that. And if you don't do that, you're not gonna end up anywhere. Success is an earned metric. It's not. It doesn't show up just naturally.
Mm.
An example of that is like my LinkedIn stuff. Like I didn't start getting uh, viral. I put that in air quotes because I'm not completely viral yet, but that took like 4 or 6 months of actually posting, and that it took me 3 months to get even like 1,000 followers, and now I might get that in like a month or so. But it was earned. It was me posting consistently working at it, improving my language, improving my communication, knowing what people want to hear. And it's the same thing with anything, right? You have to improve on what you do, and you prove that by doing projects, by building your robot. At first, maybe it doesn't walk, and then it walks, then it speaks, and then it dances on your table. Who knows?
Hopefully, hopefully, hopefully.
That's the dream, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Let's see
What?
if I build it. I will send you my
Yeah,
progress.
watch out, Boston Robotics. Tomas
Watch out.
coming.
Exactly, exactly. So, last two questions: where can people reach out to you and see more of you, your content on LinkedIn? You're pretty present. You're present. Like, how can people learn more from you and reach out?
Yeah, so LinkedIn's the best method. You can find me on LinkedIn, Dylan Anderson. Um, I work at Red Kite, so that I'm wearing a bow tie in my picture. So if you can't find it, then you're not looking hard enough. Um, and then I'm also starting to write on Medium because I think LinkedIn is great, but it is a lot of like short pieces that people like to zoom scroll by. So I'm starting to write a lot more long form stuff in Medium where I build out my ideas and build out my stuff, and hopefully that might lead into a book sometime. And
Hmm.
then yeah, I'm looking to put out some products at some point soon, just around things I've learned over the past, and because I think it'd just be helpful for people. There's a lot of products out there, but I think a lot of them like miss the mark on a few things. So a lot of stuff that we talked about on this podcast, I'm looking to productionize. So yeah, buy me on LinkedIn though. That's the main place.
Awesome. Dylan, would you have a message for the Let's Talk AI community?
Yeah, I would say keep being interested, keep listening to these kinds of podcasts. I think this kind of thing separates you from a lot of other people, and acting on it, building on it, learning about AI and data in general. I mean, I think this podcast is a great forum because it's talking to the future and AI and ML, but it's also appreciating and understanding everything around it. So keep doing that, and take after the philosophy Tama has put into this podcast.
Well, thanks a lot, Dylan, for your time, for coming on the show. I had such a great time. Super inspired by what you're doing, either on LinkedIn or on your consulting journey and data world journey. I look forward to speak again soon, and I wish you to have a wonderful day. And to everyone who's listening, uh, go follow the content of Dylan. I think there is a lot to learn there, and we mentioned before like how to separate like good content, good information to the flow of LinkedIn gurus. A guest coming soon, Francesco, talks a lot about the LinkedIn gurus, and so yeah. Reach out to Dylan if you have any questions. Reach out to me if you have any question. And Dylan, I thank you again a lot for coming on the show and sharing with us.
No, thanks so much for having me. This has been a great time. So really appreciate it, and love chatting about this stuff.
Awesome. See you.